Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The storm clawed at the battered shell of Outpost Delta, shrieking like a living thing. Captain Marin Hale tightened his scarf over his mouth, boots sliding across the thin sheen of ice building along the corridors. It was the third week of blackouts. Supplies were low, morale lower. He could have stayed curled in his bunk like the others, but something had pulled him into the storm, something he couldn't explain. A faint signal on the scanners, too faint to be man-made. Or maybe it was. Just loneliness gnawing at his mind. He moved cautiously through the wrecked atrium, lights flickering in lazy, dying patterns. That's when he saw her. Curled against the broken wall, wrapped in the ruins of a survival blanket, was a woman. At least, she looked like a woman. Her skin shimmered faintly under the emergency lights, streaked with soft patterns that pulsed, like veins of light. Marin froze. His breath misted heavily as he stared, heart-pounding. Was she injured? Dangerous? The figure stirred. Her violet eyes cracked open, focusing on him with a mixture of fear and confusion. She shrank back, pressing herself tighter against the wall, slowly, carefully. Marin lowered his weapon. "Hey, easy. I'm not here to hurt you." His voice sounded raw even to his own ears, from too many days without real conversation. She didn't answer. Her gaze darted toward the exits, calculating. Her whole body was trembling from cold, or maybe fear, probably both. Marin dropped to a knee, keeping his movements slow. He peeled off his heavy thermal coat and held it out toward her. "You're freezing. Take it." She stared at it, suspicious. Her hands, delicate and thin, barely lifted from her sides. She shivered violently. "Come on," he coaxed gently. "You'll die out here." After an endless moment, she reached out, brushing her fingers against the fabric. Her hands, icy, trembling, clutched the coat to her chest. She wrapped herself in it with desperate urgency, still eyeing him like he might vanish or strike at any moment. Marin dared a small step closer. "Can you walk?" She made a small noise, something between a whimper and a word. Her legs shifted under her, awkward and weak. He extended his gloved hand, palm up. "It's okay. You're safe." She hesitated. Then, tentatively, she placed her hand in his. Her touch was feather-light, almost weightless, but Marin felt something under his skin like a tremor, a heartbeat not his own. He swallowed, pushing back the surge of unease. "Let's get you inside," he murmured. They moved slowly through the hallways, Marin matching her shaky steps. She leaned on him more than walked, the cold sapping her strength. Each time she stumbled, he caught her gently, careful not to startle her. She didn't speak. But every so often, he caught her stealing glances at him, furtive, assessing. Trust was a fragile thing. He didn't dare rush it. At last, they reached one of the old crew quarters. He kicked open the door and ushered her in. The room was dusty, and dim but mercifully warmer. "Here," Marin said, easing her onto the bunk. She sagged down gratefully, clutching the coat tighter around herself. Marin crouched nearby, opening a storage locker. He tossed out a few battered heat packs, activating them with sharp cracks between his fingers. As he placed them around her, the air warmed noticeably. She closed her eyes, sighing, a soft, fragile sound that made Marin's chest ache. "Better?" he asked. She nodded once, barely perceptible. Marin leaned back against the wall, giving her space. His body ached from tension. His mind raced with questions. "Can you understand me?" he asked carefully. A pause. Then a slow nod. Relief flooded through him. "Good. That's good." He smiled awkwardly. "I'm Marin Hale." She stared at him, expression unreadable. Then she lifted her hand slowly, touched her chest. A soft, melodic word slipped from her lips, almost too quiet to hear. "Aaron. Aaron," he repeated, tasting the sound. "That's your name?" She gave a small, exhausted smile. The first, real emotion he'd seen on her face. The moment stretched between them, fragile and trembling like a new web spun in a storm. Marin shifted closer. "Where are you from, Aaron?" Her face clouded. She turned away, staring blankly at the pitted wall. Her fingers tightened around the coat. "Hey," Maren said, his voice gentle. "It's okay. You don't have to tell me. Not yet." Arin's shoulders sagged, a shiver running through her that had nothing to do with cold. Outside, the wind keened against the outpost, rattling the steel beams. Inside, a small generator hummed to life, flickering light over the broken floor. Maren watched her carefully. Her glow was stronger now, the filaments under her skin pulsing in time with her heartbeat. He found himself studying the way she moved, the way her expressions, though strange, mirrored emotions he understood all too well. Fear, exhaustion, a desperate flicker of hope. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his old holo emitter. He thumbed it on, projecting a faint constellation map onto the ceiling. Tiny blue stars twinkled in the dim room. Arin gasped softly. She craned her neck upward, wonder flashing across her face. Maren chuckled quietly. "It's not much. Just keeps me company sometimes." She pointed delicately at a cluster of stars, her expression shifting, intense, searching. Her fingers traced a small section he'd never really paid attention to before. Maren watched her, heart thudding. "Is that home?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Arin didn't answer in words. Instead, she touched her chest again, then pointed back at the constellation. Maren swallowed hard. His throat felt tight. Here they were, two strangers, from worlds apart, yet somehow impossibly sharing this fragile, flickering connection. He smiled, aching and real. "We'll get you there," he said. "Somehow. I promise." Arin turned her violet eyes on him, blinking slowly. Then shyly she reached out and touched his hand. Her skin was warm now. Not freezing, not shaking, just warm and real. And for the first time in a long time, Maren felt something spark to life inside him. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Galactic Nova Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. As the old outpost shuddered under the raging storm, Maren and Arin sat side by side, two lost travelers finding a fragile kind of shelter, not just from the cold, but from the emptiness that had once consumed them. Tonight, at least, neither of them would be alone. The storm had eased into a low, constant moan, like the outpost itself was breathing. Inside the small room, the makeshift warmth wrapped around them, but the silence grew heavy, almost louder than the winds outside. Maren sat on the floor, back against the bunk. He watched Arin carefully out of the corner of his eye. She studied, the constellations flickering across the ceiling with a childlike intensity, tracing patterns with one slender finger. Finally, he broke the silence. "You hungry?" Arin turned her head slightly, her pale hair slipping across her face. Her expression was hesitant, unsure. Maren rummaged through the storage bin beside him, pulling out 2 ration bars. They were dry, bland, designed more for survival than comfort. He offered one with a small, apologetic smile. "Not exactly fine dining," he said, "but it keeps you alive." She reached out slowly, fingertips brushing his as she took the bar. That small touch, accidental, fleeting, sent a strange shiver through him. Not fear, not exactly. Something older, more human. Arin sniffed the bar curiously before nibbling the edge. Her nose crinkled in distaste. Maren laughed softly. "Yeah. Tastes like old cardboard mixed with regret." She tilted her head at him, confused. "Bad," he clarified, miming a grimace. After a beat, she smiled. A real, genuine smile. Small, but dazzling. Maren's chest tightened. "Bad," she echoed softly, her accent shaping the word into something new and beautiful. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Every so often Arin would glance at him, as if trying to figure out what kind of creature he was. Finally, she set the bar down carefully on her lap and spoke. "You alone?" Maren blinked. It had been so long since someone asked, not just about his orders or survival strategies, but about him. He shrugged, forcing a smile he didn't feel. Yeah, guess I am. Aaron frowned as if she didn't like the sound of that. She pressed her hand to her chest again, then extended it toward him, a silent offering. He hesitated only a second before mirroring her gesture, palm over his heart, then reaching out. Their fingertips brushed, the contact brief but electric. Aaron's expression shifted, softening. Understanding passed between them without words. Two souls adrift, colliding in the endless dark. Maren leaned his head back against the bunk, staring at the stars on the ceiling. You know, he said after a while, voice low, I used to think space was beautiful, endless, full of possibilities. He swallowed, the old bitterness rising. Now it just feels empty. The words hung between them, raw and unpolished. Aaron listened without speaking. When he dared glance at her, he found her eyes shimmering, not just with the reflection of the holographic stars, but with something deeper, a sadness she understood all too well. You, she said, struggling for the right words, not empty. He huffed a bitter laugh. Feels like it. Aaron shook her head firmly. She leaned closer, her hand hovering just above his heart. Not touching, but close enough that he felt her warmth radiating through the thin air. Light, she said. Still there, just lost. Maren closed his eyes, fighting a sudden, stupid urge to cry. God, how long had it been since anyone said something like that to him? Since anyone had seen him? When he opened his eyes again, she was still there, patient, waiting. No judgment, no pity, just presence. He cleared his throat, desperate to shift the subject before he unraveled completely. You're not from here, he said, voice steadier now. Aaron smiled faintly, as if the idea was absurd. No, she agreed. How did you get here? The light in her eyes dimmed. She looked away, wrapping the coat tighter around herself. Ran, she whispered. Hunted. Maren stiffened. Who? His voice was sharper than he intended. Aaron flinched, shrinking into herself. He immediately softened. Sorry, he said quickly. You don't have to tell me if you're not ready. She gave a tiny nod, grateful. Maren dragged a hand through his messy hair. Damn it, he muttered under his breath. This place isn't safe. He stood abruptly and began pacing, mind racing. If someone, or something, was hunting her, staying put could get them both killed. Aaron watched him, silent. When he finally stopped, she reached out and tugged lightly at the hem of his jacket. He looked down, startled. She pointed to the holographic star map, still spinning lazily on the ceiling. Then at herself, then at him. Find, she said simply. Together. Maren stared at her for a long moment. The weight of that word settled in his chest. Together. After so much time dragging himself through silence and despair, someone wanted to find something with him. He exhaled shakily, a small helpless laugh escaping. Yeah, he said hoarsely. Yeah, all right. Together? Aaron smiled again, a little wider this time. Outside, the wind shifted, howling around the broken towers. Inside, in that small forgotten room, a bond was forming, fragile but fierce. Two survivors, two lost souls, finding not just shelter, but maybe something worth holding on to. The old engineering bay smelled like rust and forgotten dreams. Maren led Aaron through the narrow corridors, stepping over fallen beams and cracked glass. His flashlight bobbed with each step, throwing long shadows across the walls. Stay close, he said over his shoulder. He didn't have to tell her twice. Aaron was practically glued to him, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. She moved with an eerie grace, but her eyes flicked nervously at every distant creak and moan of the old structure. Maren slowed his pace, letting her keep up without feeling chased. We'll need supplies, he said. If we're going to get you out of here, we'll need everything we can find. Aaron said nothing, but he felt her small nod of agreement behind him. They reached the bay doors, half collapsed but still standing. Maren grunted, bracing his shoulder against the twisted metal, forcing a gap wide enough for them to slip through. Inside, the cavernous room yawned before them, filled with broken transport skiffs, old cargo crates, and the skeletal remains of a long-abandoned shuttle. Arin's eyes widened. She stepped forward slowly, gazing at the strange wreckage. Maren watched her, an unexpected fondness tugging at his heart. This, he said with a chuckle, was supposed to be humanity's future. He kicked a loose bolt across the floor. It skittered into the shadows. Arin turned to him, brow furrowed in confusion. He shrugged. Didn't really work out. She tilted her head, studying him. Sad, she said simply. Maren smiled sadly. Yeah, it is. They spent the next hour scavenging through the wreckage. Maren dug through crates, tossing aside useless parts, cursing under his breath when his gloves snagged on broken wires. Arin, meanwhile, moved with uncanny precision. She drifted between the debris, picking out small components Maren would have missed. Power cells, fuel converters, even a battered star map drive. She returned each time with a little offering in her hands, eyes shining, like a child bringing treasures to show a parent. You're good at this, Maren said, impressed, wiping sweat from his brow. Arin smiled shyly. Learn. Fast. He laughed. A real, genuine laugh that startled them both. Arin blinked at him, then smiled wider, pleased. The laughter faded into a companionable silence. They worked side by side, their bodies brushing now and then, a shoulder, a hand, a quick touch. Each contact lit tiny sparks under Maren's skin. At one point, Arin found an old toolkit tucked under a collapsed beam. She tugged at it, but it was stuck fast. Maren rushed over. Here, let me... Their hands collided, both reaching for the handle. For a second, neither moved. Their fingers tangled awkwardly. Heat flared between them, surprising in the chill air. Maren glanced up and found Arin's face inches from his. Her breath was soft against his cheek. Her violet eyes wide and searching. The moment stretched, fragile and trembling. Then Arin pulled back, cheeks flushing faintly, her skin glowing brighter along the delicate lines under her jaw. Sorry, she murmured. Maren shook his head, heart thudding painfully. No, don't be. He grabbed the toolkit, wrenching it free with a grunt. Got it, he said, trying to keep his voice light. Arin smiled gratefully, but there was something else in her gaze now, something raw and vulnerable. As they packed their findings into a makeshift sled, Maren couldn't stop glancing at her. There was so much he didn't know, so many unanswered questions. What had she run from? What had she lost, and why? Why did looking at her make his chest ache in ways he hadn't felt in years? Finally, as they tied down the last of the supplies, he found himself asking the one question burning in his gut. Why me? He said quietly. Arin looked up, confused. You could have run when you saw me, Maren said. You could have fought or hid. But you stayed. You trusted me. Arin's lips parted slightly. She searched his face, as if weighing the truth. Then, slowly she placed a hand over his heart, where his heartbeat thudded hard against his ribs. Light, she said simply. Maren swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult to breathe. He covered her hand with his own, holding it there, grounding himself. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel hollow, didn't feel broken. He felt seen. Outside, the stars beyond the shattered windows spun slowly, 1,000 silent witnesses to a moment neither of them could quite explain. They stood there, in the ruins of humanity's failed dreams, building something new, something real out of nothing but hope, and in Maren's heart a tiny ember flickered to life. Maybe, just maybe. He wasn't alone after all. The days blended together, the storm outside a constant, unwelcome companion. Inside their makeshift shelter, the air was thick with the quiet hum of growing intimacy. Every glance, every small gesture seemed to mean more than it should. Maren felt it the most when they woke up in the mornings, when the faint light from the broken windows touched Arin's face. She always seemed so peaceful then, the sharp edges of her exhaustion softened in sleep. He hated waking her, but there was always something that needed fixing, something new to build or scavenge. He never wanted to leave her alone for too long. Ready? He asked one morning, when the weight of the silence between them had grown too heavy. Arryn blinked, her eyes still glazed with the fog of sleep. She sat up slowly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The quiet vulnerability of the moment made Marin's chest tighten. "Ready," she said softly, as if it was a promise she hadn't fully made to herself. She stood, stretching in that way. That felt so human, so delicate. Marin tried not to stare. He wasn't good at this slow-building closeness that seemed to sneak up on him when he wasn't paying attention. "Okay," he murmured, handing her a thin layer of fabric to keep warm. "I think we've got everything for the next phase." She nodded, taking the cloth, but her hand lingered on his for just a moment longer than necessary. Marin sucked in a breath, confused by the way his pulse quickened at the touch. The air seemed heavier now, charged almost, like a storm waiting to break. "You okay?" Arryn asked, her voice small, almost hesitant. He looked at her, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired. Been a long few days." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. There was something in her gaze, soft, questioning, but also understanding. "I don't mind," she said quietly, her voice soft but certain. "Staying." Marin blinked, caught off guard by the honesty in her tone. Her words felt like something sacred, as if she had opened a door just to crack into something deeper. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. She nodded, eyes never leaving his. The world outside, the wreckage of civilization, they all faded into the background in that instant. "Not alone," she said, the words fragile, but enough to make Marin's heart skip. A soft breath escaped him. "I never meant for you to be alone." Her smile was soft, but it carried a weight he felt as he held her gaze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Just the sound of the wind scraping against the walls and the faint hum of the power grid in the corner. He stepped closer. Her breath hitched, barely noticeable, but it was enough. Enough for him to feel the quiet pull between them. Without thinking, he reached out, brushing his fingers against the soft curve of her cheek. The touch was hesitant at first, a question, unsure of whether it would be welcomed. Arryn didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into the touch, eyes fluttering closed for a moment, as if the world had paused just for them. Marin's pulse raced. The simple gesture, the connection, it felt like the world outside had shrunk. In this room, in this fleeting moment, they were the only two people who mattered. He started, his voice rough, struggling to find the right words. "I don't know how to be close to someone like you." Arryn's eyes opened, the vulnerability in them disarming. "You don't have to know," she said softly, reaching up to place her hand over his. "You just have to be." Her words hung in the air between them, simple, honest, but they cracked something, wide open inside him. Something he hadn't realized he'd been holding in for years. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. The quiet strength in her features, the way she moved with a grace that almost seemed alien, yet so painfully familiar. She was a survivor, just like him. And in her, he saw someone who had carried her own burdens for too long, who had been lost, just like him. Arryn smiled again, gentle but full of hope. "I trust you." Her words broke him. It wasn't that they were just words. They were a quiet promise, an unspoken bond. She trusted him, despite everything, despite the chaos of their lives, despite their differences. "I don't deserve that," he murmured, his voice tight with emotion. "You do," she whispered, stepping even closer until their bodies were almost touching. "You do." The world around them faded again. The distant thrum of the storm outside, the low hum of their shelter, everything dissolved into the feeling of her presence, the warmth she radiated, the steady rhythm of their hearts sinking just for a moment. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable now. It was intimate, necessary. "Together," Arryn said, her eyes never leaving his. Marin nodded, slowly, feeling the weight of her words. "Yeah," he agreed softly. "Together." And in that moment he knew. There was no going back. Whatever came next, whatever dangers they would face, he wouldn't face them alone. Not anymore. The storm had finally passed. The air outside was cold, but still, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. Inside their shelter, the quiet between Maren and Arin felt different. The space between them no longer felt heavy with unspoken words. It was comfortable now, like an unbroken thread connecting them. They sat on the floor, the remnants of their makeshift dinner scattered around them. Maren found himself staring at Arin in the soft glow of their dim light, marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. "Where will we go?" Arin asked suddenly, her voice tentative, as though it was a question she'd been meaning to ask but hadn't known how. Maren paused, his thoughts drifting. He hadn't allowed himself to think that far ahead. Every day had been about survival, about making it to the next hour, the next moment. But now, the future felt different. It wasn't just about escape. It wasn't about running anymore. He met her gaze, steady and calm. "We'll find a way. Together." Her lips parted slightly, as though his words held more meaning than they should. There was a quiet vulnerability in her eyes, a raw openness that mirrored his own unspoken fears. "You—" She trailed off, biting her lip. "You really believe that?" Maren smiled softly, leaning forward. "I do. I don't know how yet, but I believe it." Arin's fingers brushed his hand, a fleeting touch, but enough to send a spark through him. It was her way of saying she trusted him, and for once Maren didn't feel like he had to shoulder the weight of the universe on his own. "I don't know how to live in a world like this," she admitted, her voice small. "Everything is broken. And She hesitated, then closed her eyes as if trying to gather the courage to say it. "I don't know where to go anymore." Maren's heart ached for her. He could see it. The pain, the loss, the weight of everything she'd been through. The same pain he carried, buried deep beneath the layers of his own scars. He reached out, taking her hand in his, threading their fingers together. The contact felt like the most natural thing in the world. "You don't have to go anywhere," he said softly. "Not alone." Her eyes fluttered, and for a moment there was nothing but silence. The kind of silence that spoke volumes. She squeezed. His hand, and the simple act felt like everything they hadn't said before, everything they didn't need to say. Maren pulled her closer, just a little, the warmth between them growing. Arin's breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maren allowed himself to breathe, to just exist. He felt the weight of their shared history, their brokenness, their pain, their quiet, fragile trust. But underneath it all there was something else, something lighter, something that felt like the first breath after being submerged underwater. A chance. A choice. "Wherever we go," he murmured, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "We'll face it together. I promise." She nodded, her face so close to his now that he could feel the warmth of her skin. Her lips parted, and he thought for a moment she might say something more. But instead she simply pressed a kiss to his cheek, soft, almost shy. The world outside felt a lifetime away as they sat there, the quiet between them no longer filled with uncertainty, but with something stronger, something that neither of them had been prepared for. A connection. Arin pulled back just enough to meet his eyes again. "Together," she repeated softly, as if she needed to hear it once more. Maren smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached deep into his heart. "Yeah, together." And just like that, the fear of the unknown didn't feel so big anymore. Because, for the first time in so long, he had someone who saw him, someone who chose him. The stars outside flickered softly in the sky, silent witnesses to a new beginning. If this story moved you, share it with someone who loves powerful tales from distant worlds. Don't forget to like and let us know in the comments what would you have done.